I never thought a broken heater would lead to the most awkward, yet somehow the most unforgettable conversation of my life. But that's exactly how it went down one freezing January night at the lodge where I was supposed to be on a solo winter retreat. Spoiler alert, I called the maintenance guy late on purpose. Not because I needed help, well, not exactly, but because the moment I first saw him, I wanted any excuse to talk to him. Okay, let me backtrack a bit. I'm Alex, a city guy through and through, used to the chaos of urban life, but always craving some quiet to reset my brain. So when I scored a last-minute week at this ski lodge up in the mountains, I thought, perfect. No distractions, no obligations, just snow, silence, and me. What I didn't expect was that the lodge would feel more like a tiny, insulated bubble where the outside world and its usual distractions were completely shut off. No bars, no restaurants open at night, just this wooden cabin with creaky floors, an unreliable heater, and, as it turned out, the maintenance guy. His name was Matt. I met him the afternoon I arrived, when I paused by the front desk to ask for some extra towels. He was tall, with that easy smile and a kind of rugged look that screamed, "I know my way around tools and snowstorms." But it wasn't just his appearance. There was something in the way he nodded, like he genuinely cared about the little lodge and the people staying there. It felt rare, and honestly, kind of magnetic. The heater in my cabin was borderline ancient, and by nightfall it was clear it wasn't going to keep me warm. The air turned icy, and I realized I might have to call for help. Now, here's where I admit I was being a bit selfish. I didn't actually want the heater fixed right away. I wanted a reason to hear his voice, so I waited until it was freezing, made a show of getting out my phone, and called the front desk just to ask if they could send someone to check the heater. When Matt answered, there was that same warmth in his voice, a calm that somehow made the cold less biting. He promised to come over soon, and that gave me this weird flutter in my chest. I'm pretty sure I was smiling like a goofball as I hung up. When he arrived, toolbox in hand, he didn't just fix the heater. He stayed for a minute, chatting about the lodge, the snow, the weird charm of being stuck in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't usually the type to open up to strangers, but with Matt, it felt easy. Like, maybe this unexpected, frozen little cabin was exactly where I was supposed to be, and just like that, a busted heater turned into something way more than I ever expected. But of course, I had no idea what was coming next, because this was just the beginning. After fixing the heater, Matt didn't rush off like I expected. Instead, he pulled up a chair, well, more like an old wooden stool, and settled in by the fireplace, as if he didn't have a million other things to do around the lodge. I remember thinking, okay, this is kind of weird, but also nice. We talked about everything and nothing. How he'd been working at the lodge for a few seasons now, mostly through the winter, when the ski crowd rolled in. He told me about his hometown, a small place down in Vermont where the mountains were his backyard growing up. I shared some half-baked stories about my city life, the endless grind of office work, and why I really needed this getaway. He wasn't just polite or making small talk. Matt had this way of listening that made me actually want to say more. There was a quiet comfort in that. And somewhere between the flickering firelight and the hum of the heater finally working, I realized I wasn't just warming up physically. I was warming up to the idea that maybe I wasn't going to be alone this week. The night air outside was still bitter cold, but inside the cabin, something else was starting to thaw. Matt's easy laughter filled the room, and the awkwardness I'd felt before was dissolving. I don't know if he noticed, but when he looked at me, I felt like I could be exactly myself. No masks, no pretense. Eventually, he glanced at his watch and said, "I should probably get back. The lodge has a way of falling apart if I'm not around." He smiled, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes, like he didn't quite want to leave. "But hey, if your heater acts up again, you know who to call." I nodded, trying to hide the little jolt of disappointment when the door closed behind him. The next day, I found myself scanning the lodge's common areas just to catch a glimpse of Matt before he disappeared for his next round of repairs. He was always a bit busy, juggling multiple fixes, but every time our eyes met, that same easy smile was there, like some secret connection I wasn't quite ready to name yet. One afternoon, I was in the lounge, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted more like burnt toast than anything else, when Matt wandered in carrying a snow shovel. We ended up standing side by the big windows, watching the snow fall like it was a movie scene, the kind that's too perfect to be real. "Crazy how much snow we got last night," I said, making conversation. He nodded, brushing snowflakes off his jacket. "Yeah, it's beautiful, but also a pain in the ass when it piles up like this." We laughed, and then there was one of those moments where neither of us spoke, just soaking in this odd but calming silence together. I wanted to say something, anything, that would break the quiet without ruining it. So I blurted out, "Do you ever get tired of this place? Like, all this snow and cold?" Matt shrugged. "Sometimes, but then I think about all the people who come here to escape their own kind of cold. I guess I like being the one who helps keep the place running. Feels meaningful, you know?" I smiled, feeling that same pull again. "Yeah, I get that. I'm here to escape too, I guess, from everything." He looked at me, and for just a second, it felt like he saw the real me. The part one usually kept locked away. "Well, you've got a good spot here, and if you need anything, I'm just a call away." I wanted to tell him I didn't need just the heater fixed, that maybe what I really needed was someone like him to talk to. But I clammed up, suddenly self-conscious. That night, lying in bed with the heater humming softly, I found myself staring at my phone, unsure if I should text him or pretend like it was all just a friendly thing. Eventually, I sent a simple message. "Thanks again for fixing the heater. Made the place feel a lot less lonely." His reply came almost instantly. "Anytime, Alex. Hope you're staying warm." That small exchange sparked something I hadn't expected, a thread of connection that pulled tighter with every message. Over the next few days, our conversations grew from casual check-ins about the heating system to sharing favorite music, winter stories, and even cooking disasters. One afternoon, Matt invited me to join him out back to help clear some snow off the lodge's old wooden deck. I wasn't exactly dressed for manual labor, but I figured, why not? The sun was out, the snow was sparkling, and the air had that crisp freshness that only mountain winters can have. As we shoveled side by side, laughing at our clumsy attempts not to slip or throw snow on each other, I realized how easy it was to be around him, like we'd known each other far longer than a few days. When we finally paused to catch our breath, Matt wiped sweat off his brow and said, "You're not bad at this." I grinned. "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises." He smiled back, and for a moment, everything else faded. The snow, the cold, the solitude. All of it felt like it was just background noise to what was happening between us. Later that evening, back in my cabin, I caught myself replaying the day over and over in my head. It was ridiculous, really. Here I was, a grown man who came on a winter trip to be alone, and instead, I was falling for the maintenance guy who fixed my heater. I didn't know where this was heading, or if it was even real, but one thing was clear. I wasn't just calling about broken heaters anymore. I was hoping for something more. The days passed in a blur of snowy mornings and quiet evenings, but my thoughts kept circling back to Matt. It wasn't just the way he looked or his easy charm, though, yeah, both of those were a factor. It was that feeling I got around him, like something was shifting inside me, something I'd been ignoring for too long. On my fourth night at the lodge, a snowstorm rolled in heavier than anyone expected. The wind howled through the trees, and the power flickered a few times before going out completely. I sat alone in the dark, the only light coming from my phone screen, when I realized how much I was counting on hearing from Matt. I texted him, half joking, "Power's out. Think I'm about to freeze to death. Rescue mission?" I wasn't sure if he'd even get the message, but almost immediately, my phone buzzed. On my way. "Hang tight, Alex." In less than 20 minutes, there was a knock at my cabin door. I opened it to find Matt standing there with a flashlight, bundled in layers that looked like they could survive an avalanche. "I brought backup," he said, grinning and holding up a thick blanket and a thermos of hot coffee. I laughed, feeling that warm buzz I'd come to associate with him. "You really didn't have to." "Yeah, but I wanted to," he said simply. We settled in front of the fireplace, which was thankfully still working despite the blackout. The room felt smaller and cozier in the dim light, and for once, I didn't mind being stuck inside. Matt and I talked for hours, the kind of conversation that moves slowly but leaves you feeling like you're peeling back layers, bit by bit. He told me about his dreams beyond the lodge, Not just the mountains and the snow, but the music he played on weekends at a local bar, the songs he wrote but never shared. I confessed my own fears about city life, about being stuck in routines I wasn't sure I wanted. At some point, the storm outside faded to a quiet snowfall, and the silence between us felt less like an absence and more like a shared space. Then, out of nowhere, Matt reached over and lightly brushed my hand. It was such a small gesture, but it hit me like a lightning bolt. My heart hammered, and for a second, I couldn't speak. He looked at me, eyes searching, and asked quietly, "Do you want me to stay?" I nodded, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something I'd been avoiding for years. The following morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world blanketed in fresh snow that sparkled in the weak winter sun. We went outside to shovel the paths again, but this time, there was a new energy between us. Lighter, warmer, like the air had finally shifted. Later that day, Matt invited me to the lodge's common room for movie night. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a few guests huddled around a small TV, but somehow, sitting close to him on the worn-out couch felt like the most natural thing in the world. We shared popcorn, whispered jokes, and when the movie ended, we lingered, neither of us ready to break the quiet. I could feel the tension building, the unspoken question hanging in the air between us. Finally, Matt took a deep breath and said, "I've been wanting to do this since you first called about the heater." Before I could even process what he meant, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and tentative at first, like testing the waters. But then it deepened, and all the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble. When we pulled apart, I was breathless. "Why didn't you say anything before?" He shrugged with a smile. "Guess I was waiting for the right moment. Or maybe for you to call me." I laughed, shaking my head. "I definitely called you. More than once." Matt's grin widened. "Good. Because I'm not done with you yet." Over the next few days, everything felt different. The snow, the silence, the cold. They were still there, but they didn't matter as much anymore. I had Matt. And that made this place, this little lodge in the middle of nowhere, feel like home. On my last night before heading back to the city, we sat outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars peek through the clear sky. I reached over, took his hand, and realized that sometimes the best things happen when you break the rules, like calling the maintenance guy late on purpose. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a winter fling or a passing fancy. It was real, and it was just the beginning. I kept staring up at the stars, the cold air biting at my cheeks, but it didn't matter. Matt's hand in mine was warm, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. We sat there for a long time, neither of us rushing to fill the silence, just existing in the quiet comfort that was growing between us. After a while, Matt shifted and looked over at me, his breath misting in the frosty air. "You're leaving tomorrow, huh?" "Yeah," I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I'd planned this trip as a temporary escape, but now I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to the city at all. He was quiet for a moment before he asked, "What happens after you leave?" I didn't have a clear answer, so I shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I just hope this was a nice break. A week to clear my head. But now, I'm not so sure." Matt squeezed my hand gently. "Sometimes, a week is all it takes to change everything." That struck me. It was true. In just a few days, my whole perspective had shifted. The loneliness I'd expected had been replaced with something unexpected. Hope, connection, maybe even love. The next morning was a mess of packing and half-hearted goodbyes to the few other guests. But Matt showed up early, just like he said he would. We loaded my bags into the car, and for a moment I hesitated, wondering if I should just cancel the whole trip and stay. "Hey," Matt said softly, reading the look on my face. "Pine trees, snow, and bad coffee aren't for everyone." I laughed, the tension easing a little. "You're right, but I'm not ready to say goodbye yet." He looked relieved. "Good, because I'm not letting you go that easily." That afternoon, as we drove down the winding mountain road, I realized how much I was going to miss this place. And him, the way he'd become the unexpected highlight of my trip, the person who made me feel seen and understood. Back in the city, I found myself constantly checking my phone, waiting for his messages. And when they came, they were like little lifelines. Snapshots of his days fixing things at the lodge, silly selfies, and thoughtful texts that kept the spark alive. Weeks turned into months, and we managed the long-distance thing surprisingly well. I made plans to visit the lodge again, this time with no broken heaters to call about. Just me and him. One chilly spring weekend, I found myself back on that snowy mountain, but this time things felt different. Matt greeted me with a hug that squeezed all the doubts out of my mind. We spent the day hiking, laughing, and sharing stories until the sun dipped behind the peaks. That night, sitting by the fire, he pulled me close and whispered, "You don't have to leave again." I looked into his eyes and realized I didn't want to. The city could wait. Because here, with Matt, I'd found something that felt real, something worth holding on to. So yeah, it all started with a broken heater and a late-night call. But it ended up being so much more than that. Sometimes the best things in life come from the moments you least expect, and the people you call on a whim. That spring weekend at the lodge was one of those moments you replay in your head when life gets messy and loud. But even as perfect as it felt, there was this undercurrent of uncertainty beneath the surface. I mean, it's one thing to visit someone when it's a getaway, but what happens when real life crashes back in? When you have to figure out if the us you're building can survive the day-to-day? After that weekend, I went back to the city with this mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in my chest. Matt and I kept talking, texting, FaceTiming whenever we could. But as the weeks passed, the distance felt heavier. I was juggling work, social obligations, and the usual city chaos, while he was still up in the mountains, maintaining the lodge and living that slower, steadier life. One Thursday night, I was scrolling through my phone, exhausted after a long day at the office, and I saw a message from Matt. "Can we talk?" Like, really talk? I stared at it for a while, heart racing. I knew what that meant. It wasn't just small talk or casual check-ins anymore. Something was on his mind. I called him right away. "Hey," he answered, voice quieter than usual. "Hey, what's up?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I've been thinking a lot about us. About how this distance is hard, and I don't want to lose what we have." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, me too. I've been feeling that way." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not ready to give up either. But I'm wondering, what does that mean? For us? For the future?" That question hit me like a ton of bricks, because up until then, I'd been floating on the buzz of new love, but we hadn't really talked about the next step. Was this just a fling? A winter romance? Or something more? I don't know, I confessed, but I want to find out. I want to see if we can make this work. He laughed softly, relief evident in his voice. "Good, because I'm willing to try. Even if it means some tough conversations." We spent the next hour hashing it out. The challenges of distance, our hopes, fears, and what we wanted from life. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wanted to curl up and hide from all the reality creeping in. But by the end, we'd made a pact, to be honest, to communicate, and to fight for whatever this was. A couple weeks later, Matt surprised me with a weekend visit to the city. Seeing him navigate the crowded streets, bundled up against the early summer chill, was both endearing and kind of hilarious. He admitted this city overwhelmed him, but there was this spark in his eyes whenever he was with me. One evening, after a long day of wandering the parks and grabbing coffee, we found ourselves sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting golden light over everything. "I know this isn't your world," I said gently, "but I want you to feel at home here. Or at least with me." He smiled, reaching for my hand. "And I want to find a way to bring you back to the mountains sometimes. Maybe not forever, but enough." The thought of splitting my time between two very different lives was daunting, but the idea of not having him in my life was unbearable. Over the next months, we fell into a rhythm. Weekends together, endless phone calls, planning trips back and forth. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and moments when the distance felt unbearable, but there was also laughter, shared dreams, and an ever-growing bond. Then, one chilly autumn evening, Matt flew back to the city with a surprise. I opened the door to find him holding a small, slightly battered guitar case and a suitcase just as worn. "I'm done waiting," he said, eyes bright. "I want to try living here, for a while at least. See where this goes." I was stunned. Part of me wanted to ask if he was sure, if the city life was really his thing. But then I saw the hope in his face, the vulnerability, and I just knew. "We'll figure it out," I said, pulling him inside for the longest hug. That night, as we lay tangled in the sheets of my cramped apartment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: certainty. Love, I realized, wasn't about perfect timing or flawless plans. It was about showing up, being real, and deciding together to make it work. So yeah, it all started with a broken heater and a late-night call, but it turned into something I never saw coming. And honestly, I'm glad I made that call. Because sometimes, taking a chance on the unexpected is exactly what you need. Having Matt move to the city felt like stepping into uncharted territory for both of us. He was trading mountain peaks and the steady rhythm of lodge life for crowded streets, honking cars, and the kind of noise that never seemed to quit. And honestly, I worried. Not because I doubted us, but because I knew how much this change meant for him and how much adapting would take. The first week he was here, we barely saw each other. Between his job hunting and me trying to keep up my own work grind, our days were packed. But every night, without fail, we'd collapse onto my worn-out couch, sharing whatever meal we could throw together, and talk about the tiny moments we'd missed during the day. One evening, after a particularly long day for both of us, I found Matt sitting by the window, headphones on, strumming his guitar quietly. The city lights blurred behind him, and I realized how out of place he looked, yet how natural he was being himself. "You okay?" I asked, settling down beside him. He shrugged, not looking up. "I don't know. It's overwhelming. I miss the mountains, the quiet, the stars." I nodded, understanding that ache. Maybe the city isn't supposed to replace that. Maybe it's just a new chapter. He smiled, but it was tinged with exhaustion. "I want this to work. For us." But sometimes I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. That night, we talked for hours. About fears, about dreams, and about how love sometimes meant wrestling with discomfort and change. It wasn't about ignoring the hard stuff, but facing it together. Weeks later, Matt landed a part-time gig, playing music at a small bar downtown. It wasn't the lodge's quiet nights or the mountain air, but it was his music, his passion, finding a little space in this chaotic city. Watching him perform that first night, guitar in hand, eyes closed, lost in the music, I felt proud in a way I hadn't expected. This was his world now, at least a piece of it, and he was making it his own. We started carving out routines: Sunday morning breakfast at the corner cafe, late night talks about everything and nothing, and weekend trips back to the lodge whenever we could. Each visit was a reminder of where we came from and how far we'd come. But life in the city also brought its challenges. There were moments when Matt's mountain spirit clashed with urban realities. Like the time he got frustrated with the subway delays, or when the noise outside kept him awake for nights on end. And I had my own moments of doubt, wondering if I was asking too much of him, or if I could handle the compromises this relationship demanded. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves arguing over something stupid. A missed phone call, a forgotten errand, and the tension exploded into a conversation we'd both been avoiding. "I'm scared, Alex," Matt said, voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that we're trying to force something that's too different." I took his hand, steadying myself. "I'm scared too, but I think it's worth it." "We're worth it." We sat in silence for a long moment, the rain tapping against the window. Then, slowly, we both started to open up about our fears, our hopes, the parts of ourselves we were still trying to figure out. That day was a turning point, not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because we chose to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to keep trying. Months turned into a year, and with every challenge, we grew stronger. Matt found a little apartment not far from mine. his own space where he could escape the city noise and play his guitar without worry. I got better at slowing down and appreciating the quieter moments, the kind that don't make headlines but mean everything. One lazy Saturday, as we sat in his sunlit living room surrounded by unpacked boxes and the scent of fresh coffee, he looked over at me and said, "Remember when you called me that first night? About the heater?" I laughed. How could I forget? I called late on purpose. He smiled, eyes sparkling. "I'm glad you did, because that call changed everything." I reached across the coffee table and took his hand. Yeah, it did. And as I sat there, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine, I knew that sometimes, the smallest moments, the late-night calls, the broken heaters, can lead you right where you're meant to be. Love, it turns out, isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about showing up, again and again, choosing each other even when the path isn't clear, and I couldn't wait to see where we'd go from here. A couple of years later, sitting on that same couch in Matt's apartment, I found myself thinking about how far we'd come. From a busted heater in a lonely ski lodge to this. Two people who had weathered cold nights, long distances, and the chaos of city life, still choosing each other every day. Matt caught me staring at him and smiled that easy, genuine smile that had first hooked me. "What are you thinking about?" I shrugged, feeling a warmth that had less to do with the heater and more to do with him. Just how crazy it is that a broken heater brought you into my life. He laughed softly. "Yeah, I guess sometimes the things that seem like problems are just the universe's way of pushing you in the right direction." We sat quietly for a moment, the kind of comfortable silence that didn't need filling. "Do you remember that first night?" I asked. "When I called you late on purpose just to hear your voice?" He nodded, eyes shining. "I thought you were crazy, but I'm glad you were, and so was I." That night, as snow gently fell outside, something that never quite stopped feeling magical, no matter how many winters passed, we made a simple promise. To keep choosing each other, to be patient when things got hard, and to find joy in the small moments that make life worth living. No grand declarations, no perfect endings. Just two people, imperfect and real, building something meaningful together. Sometimes, love isn't a sweeping story. It's the quiet warmth that keeps you going through the cold. And for me, that warmth was Matt, my unexpected rescue, my home, my reason to call again and again.